It's 2 a.m. You're wide awake. Your heart isn't racing. You're not anxious. You're not sick. You're just awake. You lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering what's wrong with you. You check your phone. You scroll. You feel guilty about scrolling. You put it down. Still awake. You think, I have to be up in 4 hours. Why can't I just sleep? Here's the thing nobody tells you. For most of human history, this moment, right here, wasn't a problem. It was the plan. The idea that humans sleep in one single 8-hour block. It's not natural. It's not biological. It's not even that old. It was invented. And the person who invented it wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a scientist. It was a businessman who wanted you to work more. But we'll get to him. First, let's talk about how humans actually used to sleep. In the early 1990s, a historian named Roger Kirch was doing research on nighttime in pre-industrial Europe. He wasn't studying sleep. He was just trying to understand what life looked like after dark before electricity existed. And he kept finding something strange. In diaries. In court records. In medical texts. In prayer books. In poems going back to Homer. Over and over again, people referred to something called the first sleep. Not sleep. First sleep. Which means there was a second one. Kirch eventually found over 2,000 references to this pattern across centuries of historical documents. The conclusion was unavoidable. For most of human history, people didn't sleep in one long stretch. They slept in two. Here's what a normal night looked like before the Industrial Revolution. The sun goes down. You eat. You talk. Maybe you read by candlelight if you could afford it. Then, a few hours after dark, you go to sleep. That's your first sleep. It lasts about 4 hours. Then, somewhere around midnight, you wake up. Naturally. Without an alarm. Without anxiety. And here's the part that's hard to imagine. You don't try to go back to sleep immediately. You get up. You pray. You journal. You talk to your spouse. You check on your kids. Some people went outside. Some people visited neighbors. Some people just lay in the dark and thought. Kirch described this middle period as, and this is a direct quote from his research, an interval of peace. It lasted anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. Then came the second sleep. You went back to bed. Slept another 4 hours. Woke up at dawn. That was it. That was the whole night. 2 sleeps. 1 quiet hour in the middle. For hundreds of thousands of years, that was completely normal. Now here's where it gets interesting. In the 1990s, the same decade Kirch was digging through historical archives, a sleep researcher named Thomas Ware ran an experiment. He took a group of participants and removed all artificial light from their lives. No light bulbs. No screens. No streetlights. Just natural darkness for 14 hours a night. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. But then, gradually, something shifted. The participants started waking up in the middle of the night. Not because of stress. Not because of noise. They'd sleep 4 hours, wake up for about an hour, feel completely calm and alert, and then fall back asleep for another 4 hours. They had independently recreated the exact same sleep pattern Kirch found in centuries of historical records. Ware's conclusion, biphasic sleep, sleeping in 2 shifts, is the body's natural default. The single uninterrupted 8-hour sleep that we chase every night. Your body doesn't actually know what that is. And this wasn't just a medieval European thing. Ancient Romans had a name for it, primus somnus. First sleep. Julius Caesar's military writings reference it. The historian Thucydides mentioned it in ancient Greece. A 16th-century French physician named Laurent Joubert, and this is a real historical quote, wrote that manual laborers were more fertile because they had intercourse after the first sleep when they have more enjoyment. The pattern appears in the Odyssey, in Virgil's Aeneid, in religious texts across multiple cultures. This wasn't some quirky habit a few people had. It was the default human operating system. Until one invention changed everything. Thomas Edison. In 1879, Edison patented the incandescent light bulb. And almost immediately, he started telling people how to use the extra hours it gave them. He said, and this is a real quote, "The person who sleeps 8 or 10 hours a night is never fully asleep and never fully awake." Edison believed sleep was a waste of time. He famously slept only 4 or 5 hours a night. He thought people who needed more were lazy. And with the light bulb, he now had a product that could back that opinion up. Suddenly, you didn't have to go to bed when the sun went down. You could stay up. Work more. Socialize more. Be productive more. Bedtimes pushed later and later. And when you're going to bed at 11 p.m. instead of 8 p.m., you can't afford to wake up at midnight anymore. You have to be up in 6 hours. The two-sleep pattern, which had survived for thousands of years, started collapsing. By the 1820s, parenting books in America were already advising parents to wean their children off the two-sleep habit. By the late 1800s, school schedules were standardized and alarm clocks were being mass-produced. By the 1920s, references to first sleep and second sleep had almost completely disappeared from the written record. In about 100 years, a sleep pattern that had existed for all of human history was erased. Not by science. Not by research showing it was unhealthy. Just by artificial light. And the idea that sleeping was wasting time. Here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. 30% of Americans sleep less than 6 hours a night. Over the last 50 years, humans have lost about 2 hours of sleep per night on average. And insomnia, the feeling of lying awake at night unable to sleep, is one of the most common medical complaints in the modern world. But here's the question nobody asks. What if some of that, insomnia, isn't actually a disorder? What if some of the people lying awake at 1 a.m. aren't broken? What if they're just human? Roger E. Kirch himself has argued that the modern epidemic of sleep maintenance insomnia, waking in the middle of the night and not being able to fall back asleep, might be the body trying to return to its natural pattern. Your body wakes up looking for an interval that doesn't exist anymore. It's waiting for the second sleep. But instead of letting that happen, you grab your phone. You check the time. You stress about how many hours you have left. You turn a natural biological pause into an anxiety spiral. There's something else Kirch noted about that middle hour between the two sleeps. People used it differently than we use any other part of the day. It wasn't productive time. It wasn't hustle time. It was thinking time. People would lie in the dark and reflect on their dreams. They'd pray. They'd have quiet conversations. They'd just exist without doing anything. Psychologists today call this kind of quiet, undirected mind-wandering a critical process for memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and creativity. We've basically engineered it out of our lives. We wake up at 2 a.m. and immediately reach for a screen. We never let our brains do what they've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. So here's the answer. Humans used to sleep in 2 shifts because that's what the human body actually does when you leave it alone. The 8-hour block we treat as a biological requirement. It's a product. Designed around the light bulb, the factory schedule, and the alarm clock. Your 2 a.m. awakening isn't anxiety. It's not a disorder. It's not a malfunction. It might just be your body remembering something it hasn't been allowed to do for 100 years. We didn't fix human sleep. We just found a way to make it fit the workday. And we've been exhausted ever since.